If you've written an actual book or working on a book, I highly recommend that you get on Goodreads. A lot of you probably are already on Goodreads just to share books you like to read. But once you've got something published, and this applies to these and to this one that I've self-published of my blog posts, you can put this on Goodreads too, and you can do giveaways. And it was funny because I put the first Happy Hypochondriac, I did a giveaway, and when I went back, I said, all right, I'll give 5 books away, because people love to get on there and just sign up for the giveaways. I'll give 5 books away and mail them to anywhere in the US, the UK, or Australia, because it's only in English right now. And so I did that, and when I looked, there were over 1,000 people that had signed up to get, to try to win the book. Well, that's amazing. Whether they win it or not, then they've actually seen this title.
That's great.
I read something at some point that a title and information has to get in front of somebody like 6 or 7 times before they're interested in actually buying it. So really, the more you can kind of just be in somebody's face about it without being annoying, the better. And giving something away is never annoying, so that works out pretty well. So on Goodreads, you can do that. There's the author review section. You can conduct little talks through Goodreads as well, so it'll be like an interview with the author. People can submit questions to you, so you can really engage with people who are really excited about books. Because if you are going onto Goodreads to look, then you love to read, and this is a fun way to kind of engage with readers and authors. One other thing, especially for nonfiction, this applies, is getting involved in the community with associations that might be interested in the topic. So I was at a book festival in Baltimore, and one of the other authors from our publishing group was a doctor. And so we started chatting, and he was flipping through the book, and he's like, gosh, my patients would love this. I mean, here's a doctor, and he's thinking everybody who comes in is so anxious and worried about being here. This is such a fun, happy, positive way to look at these things. I mean, they're genuine health concerns. You've had actual things that have happened to you, but you're able to push through it. This is something that my patients would enjoy. And so working with doctors, doctor associations, sort of other health associations is a good way to get it in front. I can be a speaker at those groups, or just have them sitting on the tables, whatever. There's opportunity there. So if you're writing nonfiction, whatever it's about, try to look for organizations and groups where your topic actually can be applied in some way. And you can kind of get creative with how you're fitting it in to sell it as an opportunity for them and for you. So I'll end the talk by just reading one of the little chapters in the new book, because it kind of applies to what I've been talking about. Staying optimistic, don't let these things defeat you. You can do it if you really stay at it, I guarantee you, because I never ever thought, I knew I wanted to do it, but I thought maybe I'd get one published and it might be a one-off. And the fact that now I have 2 books, I'm working on a 3rd, and I plan to do a 3rd in this series, and that I had enough material. I'm going to end up with 5 of these at least right now of the musings, which is just based on blog posts. I have so much material that I'm able to fill 5 books with it, and I just didn't even realize that it was possible until I was in the middle of it and thinking, oh my gosh, this is actually happening because I've just kept doing it stubbornly. So I'll read this, and then you can ask me questions that you'd like. Okay, so this one is called Finding My Parent Trap Twin. I've always dreamed of being Haley Mills. I watched The Parent Trap approximately 386 times as a child. That's a rough estimate. I can recite that movie word for word, and I do a heck of a take on the song Let's Get Together, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah. At the time that I first fell in love with that movie, I was about 8 years old and an only child, but I knew she was out there. My twin was waiting for me at a luxurious all-girls camp. We might not get along at first because of our uncanny resemblance, but we would eventually bond over a picture of a favorite boy singer and become best friends. Past that point, the story in my mind got a little fuzzy since my parents were together and happily married. I had no parents to trap. But I knew I couldn't have been the only child. Perhaps there had been a mix-up at the hospital and they thought she was dead. I could bring her home from camp and we would all be reunited. Or maybe they saw us both and just liked me better and thought 2 was too many. In that case, I would need to think carefully about bringing her back home. Either way, she was at that camp, a specific camp that had not yet been chosen, and fate patiently waited to bring us together. How much? $1,800? Are you crazy? My mother looked at my father like he just asked her to go to a swingers party. You must be out of your mind. I'm spending $1,800 for Kat to go to summer camp for 3 weeks. She's only 11 for Christ's sakes. I don't even spend that much for my vacations. My mother grew up poor in a 2-bedroom house packed with 12 people. I guess I could see where she was coming from. My dad, however, grew up in Florence, South Carolina in somewhat high society. He escorted girls to cotillions, had maids, and had actually attended the boys' camp on the other side of the mountain from the expensive girls' camp in question. They had trouble seeing eye to eye on the matter. I sat back quietly to watch it all unfold, already knowing that my mother would concede. She handled the money, but my dad talked her into most things. I had this opportunity, and I want her to have it now. It's my family tradition. Do you realize that on top of that $1,800 to stay in an un-air-conditioned cabin, we've got to shell out $500 more for horseback riding, and they want us to put money into something called a canteen so she can have treats each day or buy a t-shirt? What? Do you have a money tree I don't know about? She was always asking about the money tree. I think she secretly hoped that one time somebody would answer her affirmatively. As in, yes, there is a money tree in South America that sprouts 50s and 100s. She would have been on the next plane, shovel packed securely in her luggage. My dad just laughed. Money didn't matter to him. He spent what he had and he never knew the word budget. He was not concerned. Instead, my mother fretted and tried to scavenge to make ends meet. Sadly, by today's standards, that camp price is fairly reasonable. I looked up camps recently for my daughter. She's very little, but it's never too early to plan. Like my dad said, it's tradition. Nowadays, the same types of camps run $1,500 a week or more, plus extras. I might find myself making the same comments my mother did. It's all a great big circle of life. Fine, but this is ludicrous. We have to buy her a plane ticket too. And so it went as she called and made the reservations. Hurrah! One step closer to finding my twin. My best friend Belle and I boarded the plane. I had talked her to going and her mom was none too pleased about the price, but had acquiesced like mine had. Now we were two 12-year-old girls flying for the first time and all by ourselves to boot. I was suddenly struck by the feeling that maybe I hadn't thought this all the way through. Wearing a local radio station t-shirt and considering myself the height of fashion as I headed to summer camp, I couldn't quell my internal bundle of nerves. How do planes work again? It seemed like an awfully big, heavy piece of machinery to be able to lift up off the ground and take us many hours into near space. I don't know how much like a bird it looked. I don't care how much like a bird it looked. Belle must have been feeling the same tension and sense of wonder too. She ate approximately 16 little bags of peanuts. That was back in the day when people didn't seem to be as allergic as they are now. Peanuts were everywhere on the plane, or at least until Belle embarked and finished them all off. My mind now raced as fast as the air under the belly of the plane. Besides the fear of flying, would I get thrown from a horse, shoot my eye out with a gun, drown in the lake, get murdered by some crazy killer in the woods? I'd seen the movies. Get bitten by a snake? Oh, the snake. Was it too late to go back home? I hadn't ever been away from my parents for more than a couple days. This was 3 whole weeks. My anxiety eased a little when we arrived at the airport and saw a person holding up a sign with our names on it, just like in the movies. We were stars. I was already one step closer to being Haley Mills. The camp did not disappoint. It looked eerily similar to the one from the Parent Trap. They could have filmed it here for all I knew. I had chosen wisely. The smell of pine trees, lake, fresh air, and wood smoke filled my head and made me dizzy. I think I experienced some form of nature elation. Growing up in Florida, I clearly spent a lot of time barefoot outside, but this was different. This was my first time in the mountains. The air felt completely different, like it was a solid that I could crawl into and it would envelop me like a cool but loving hug. I was enamored instantly. I signed up for every camp activity I could. I wanted to do it all. The more I engaged, the more chance I would have of finding my twin. Belle didn't know my motives. She just thought I was overly enthusiastic. I figured I could just as easily find my twin during horseback riding as I could at archery or riflery or wood burning. It was a matter of numbers, really. I was a little embarrassed about my appearance, though. I had recently overcome a massive bout of chickenpox, which left me grotesquely scarred and scabbed. An especially disgusting large scab spotted my face, right in the middle of my forehead, making me look like my native country was India, if India produced severely pale people. I'm surprised Belle wanted to be seen with me. I would have just torn the scab off, but I didn't want to face another permanent pit of a scar. I had enough of those already from poor scratching choices. I would have to suck it up temporarily for the greater good of my beauty over the course of my life. Yes, I had painstakingly thought this through. However, I knew that if I found my twin, it would be hard for her to look at me in my current state, forget claiming me as long-lost kin. She would avert her eyes. I was the elephant man. In the meantime, while I waited for the scab to fall off naturally and my twin to make herself known, I decided to have a little fun. I was scared of many things, but I convinced myself that camp was a good way to embrace what frightened me and face it head on. Horseback riding was a personal favorite. It was terrifying, in my mind, terribly unpredictable. Certainly those beautiful mighty beasts would rear their hind legs and kick me into the sky if I had traversed any areas remotely behind them. I imagined they would back up to kick me even if I was yards away. I wouldn't remotely risk it. I walked large arcs around them to avoid all negative possibilities. They say that horses can sense fear, and I probably did a very poor job of masking mine when I would say in a wobbly voice, "Hi Chestnut. Aren't you a pretty boy? I'm going to get on you now. I'm pretty sure Chestnut rolled his eyes and snickered sarcastically to himself. Then, shaking more than Californian earthquake, I would trepidatiously try to throw my leg over the saddle. I was a mess. But then once I was up there, I realized, oh, I look all right. My riding boots, my velvet hat, my cool pants. Even though I had on a silly t-shirt and not a cool black jacket, I still felt like I could have emerged straight out of National Velvet. I rode and winced and inhaled deeply. I pulled and tugged and twisted the reins and squeezed my legs together to the horse's sides. I spoke calmly with authority. I leaned forward. I lifted my butt into the air and I turned in my knees. I did all these things, just at the complete wrong times. I caused the horse to trot when I wasn't ready. I made him stop when I thought I was trying to trot. On a number of occasions, I had to wait on his back while he defecated. I still loved every minute. Chestnut was my guy. I would report to my parents right away that I wanted a horse. Who would have thought that I could actually ride one? I still worried nonstop that I would get thrown, but as long as he didn't paralyze me, I knew I'd have to get right back on if he did such a terrible thing. Besides, there was an actual saying that dictated as such. I would have no choice. I have to get back on my horse. I also really took to archery and riflery. I have an intense love for target sports and earned my advanced patches with pride. I carry this love to this day, and I'm thrilled that my son is a Cub Scout so I can have access to some bows and rifles. Here's the thing, my parents never explained to me that I was slightly double jointed in my elbows. When you hold a bow, you're supposed to keep one arm straight, but my arm actually protrudes inward at the elbow so that when I release the arrow, it skims that inward elbow at a high velocity and, well, tears the skin right off. Oh my God, I yelled, and it echoed off the luscious green mountains. Flocks of birds were disturbed and burst out of the trees. Small woodland creatures stopped what they were doing and turned toward the sound emanating from my location at the archery range. I wanted to say much worse, felt the curses on my lips, but feared the repercussions. I swallowed them whole. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I doubled over, afraid to see the blood that I assumed was pouring down my arm. I was whisked away to the nurse's station to care for my missing skin, luckily only a layer or two and not much blood, and the upwelling of a bump and bruise forming on my inner elbow. I was now even more deformed. Between the forehead, the other crater scars, and the messed up arm, I was turning into Quasimodo. Not a good look for a preteen who already had bad, thick, dark, curly, unruly hair. Bandaged and feeling low, I returned to my cabin for nap, rest, letter writing, package receiving time. Much to my joy, I received a package from my mom, that lovely woman. Much to my chagrin, however, she had not paid attention to my clear instructions